This is your complete bike computer comparison between the Garmin Edge A40, the Hammerhead Karoo 3, and the Wahoo ROAM V2. I've been putting these units through their paces over the last, well, quite a long while in fact, but in particular here in the island of Gran Canaria in the Canary Islands, doing epic climbs, epic rides, epic everything on this bike with these three head units to figure out all the differences and where they work well and where they maybe differ quite a bit. The tourism board of Gran Canaria actually reached out and offered to sponsor this video. More about them of course a little bit later on in the video. For now though, I've got a whole bunch of different topic areas I want to cover on this, and so for that let's jump back over to the desk so I have things a little more organized. So here we are with the very first section, which is the pricing. In this case, here are the prices on the screen right there. The thing to keep in mind is that these are all in the general ballpark. Also keep in mind the Garmin Edge A40 has two different versions, one without solar and one with solar. The solar one simply extends the battery life using the solar on the outside edge there. That is the only difference between these models that are identical from a features and functionality standpoint. Next up, we got another quickie, which is the mounts that are included in the boxes there. All three of these include mounts that are out front mounts, which is nice, most bike computers do today. In the case of both the Garmin as well as the Hammerhead mounts, you can also mount a GoPro or something like that below that mount if you buy an accessory for it. It's not included in the box unfortunately, but you can put either bike lights or GoPros or action cameras, whatever you want on the underside there. In the case of the Wahoo mount, it's got a so-called aero mount, so it's more aerodynamic, and thus you can't mount anything on the bottom there. But it is more aerodynamic in theory than the other two. In fact, years ago, I even actually aero tested Wahoo's aero mount in a wind tunnel. Check out that video up in the corner. Okay, so next up we've got the display, touchscreen, and kind of general usability of that display. As you can see, there's three different types of displays here. In the case of the Hammerhead Karoo, you've got more of like a cell phone type display. In the case of the Garmin, you've got less colors, but still very, very visible. It's not quite that cell phone look to it. And in the case of the Wahoo, you've got even less usage of those colors in the different display elements. In terms of seeing these three units outside in both sunny conditions as well as night conditions and literally everything in between, there's no real problems on any of these. They're all perfectly fine. That said, I've seen some comments say that the Hammerhead has like the clearest or most visible display out there, and honestly it simply doesn't. It is not hard to see. Just be very clear about this, it is perfectly fine to see. But if you were to objectively look at these three displays from the view of a cyclist, you'll find that in super bright sunny conditions, like I've been riding in the Canary Islands and other places, you'll find that the Hammerhead Karoo isn't quite as visible off angle. When you're looking directly straight down at it, like this camera above me here, it is more clear. But as you pull back to the same position that you'd be riding a bike, that's when you start to see some of those minor differences there. Again, it's not really a big deal. Going to the other end of a spectrum, at nighttime, also no problems with any of the three units. I saw some complaints that said that the Karoo was just way too bright and things like that at night. Honestly, it hasn't been an issue riding a night with it. It's perfectly fine and viewable, and especially if you switch it over to dark mode. But again, it's just not like a too bright sort of thing. And inversely, the other two are perfectly fine too. So then what about the touchscreen? Well, in the case of the Wahoo, it doesn't have a touchscreen, so that makes that easy. In the case of both the Garmin and the Hammerhead, no problems even in dumping rain. I did a test here with the Karoo out in dumping rain while I'm running along. It's part of my full review, zero problems there. And the same goes for the Garmin. I did a test when that first released, showing in the rain as well, and no problems with the newer touchscreen on the Garmin Edge A40 compared to some of their past units. So then the last item is what about responsiveness in terms of the user interface and lag and things like that. In the case of the Wahoo, it's pretty good. You could rotate through stuff. There's definitely some delay there, but it's not too bad. If I look at the Garmin, I can tap into things. It definitely feels the fastest of the three. Looking at the Hammerhead, it's certainly the slowest of the three, and probably the best example is just simply swiping down. You can just see there's just a lot of lag across the board there. That said, when you're out riding, like once you open up the ride screen there and get in the ride, this swiping left and right is pretty efficient in all this. There's no problems there. It's just pulling down from the top there that tends to be slow and tends to get slower as the ride goes on. Versus when I'm in a ride here, again, no problems like this, and then simply swipe down, it's instant to go through those pages. The point of this section though is to not worry about this section. All three are fine in the sun, all three are fine in the dark, all three are fine in between all those three things, all three have a perfectly usable screen, touchscreen scenario, and all three of them are fine while you're riding, swiping between data pages. Don't overthink this section despite what the internet might tell you. The next question is what about the ease of use and the usability of the three devices? There are some people that want a super easy to use device without a lot of features, and some people that want all the features. I think all three companies would agree that Garmin has the most features, and even if they don't agree, there's just no competition there. They have the most features. But as you add more features, this is true of any software platform out there, you have to intrinsically increase complexity to deal with all those features. And Garmin has, of course, increased that complexity over time. Does that mean the Garmin unit is harder to use? No, it just means there's more menus and things to dig around into and more places you can get lost finding those features. For daily riding, it's pretty straightforward. You just tap it and you start riding. Like, it's not that hard. Just like it's true for the Wahoo as well. Start ride, just press start. It's as simple as that. And also in the case of the Hammerhead, you want to ride, you just either press the yellow button right there or press this and then press the yellow button. All three devices are pretty easy to use. You just simply tap and start going. And when it comes to the core functions, all three devices are easy to use there as well. And one of those core functions is going to be the differences in the data pages and data fields. All three devices have pretty much every data field you want on there. So things like your speed and distance and time and ascent and calories and all that kind of stuff. All of them are all there, not a problem there. Where you start to see some of the differences on them is some of the graphical data pages, things like the charts and stuff like that. Hammerhead and Garmin tend to have more of those natively built in, versus Wahoo doesn't have as many of the different graphics and charts on the unit itself while you're riding. On the flip side, one feature that Wahoo does have that the others don't is the ability to instantly increase or decrease the number of data fields on a single data page just by pressing the up and down one. So you essentially can order your most important field. In this case, my power average over 3 seconds, and then you can say, you know what, my second most important, third most important, and so on, all the way down to your total list there. You still have multiple pages by just simply tapping the page button there, but it does allow you to change kind of the focus area mid-ride if you want to. Again, some people really like that, some people just simply never use it. It gives you that flexibility there. And on the flip side, Garmin also has their Connect IQ data fields and data pages and apps that we'll talk about a little bit later on, but that allows you to expand out all those data fields as well with third-party apps that are almost always free. That said, one thing of note is that Wahoo lacks any sort of bike profile concept. So like road biking versus gravel biking versus mountain biking, which means that that's not going to feed into Strava either. And for some people, again, that won't matter, but if you have multiple bikes, and in particular if you have multiple biking genres that you do and you want different data pages or data fields for that, the lack of that on Wahoo continues to stand out compared to virtually every other bike computer out there on the market today. Now we get to the most complicated of all the sections. There is a lot of nuance here in this next one, which is mapping and navigation. So let's just start off how they're the same, and then we'll dive into the differences. First off, all three offer mapping and navigation. So on the mapping side, all three offer free downloadable maps pretty much of every country in the world, so there's not really any problems there. How you download those maps differs slightly on different units, but at the end of the day, you can get maps onto the unit and they include them for free no matter where you are in the world. So then we get on to actually navigating something, and navigating comes in a couple different forms. One being downloading a route somewhere, so from Strava, Komoot, to ride with GPS, etc. Two being that you just instantaneously want to go somewhere. You put a dot over there and say, I want to go to this dot somewhere across the town or the city or whatever the case may be. And then three being navigating back home somewhere. So if you say, I want to return to my starting point or return to my home point. Again, all three of these do that just fine. So then we get to the question of rerouting on the fly. You're going down the road and you miss a turn. How do all three of these different units deal with that? And the answer is they deal with it just fine. They reroute you based on the maps they have in the unit, does not require internet connectivity, and you'll basically catch up somewhere down the road on that particular route. I've been putting this through these paces over the last little while, and I haven't had any failures from any of these three. Their internal routing engines are very, very good these days, and all three companies have grown up and really kind of nailed the art of that. So the question is, where are those differences? Well, the first one is actually going to be the map styling in the user interface itself. As you're seeing on the screen right now, they are different map styles and how they look. And I find in general, I actually prefer Hammerhead styling. You can see there that bright section, that orangey color, that is the heat maps that are based on Suunto's heat map data. Now, depending on where you are in the world, you're going to get varying levels of success with that. If you're in Europe or a lot of the US, you're going to probably have pretty good luck with that. In other places where Suunto's heat map data isn't as strong, perhaps parts of Australia, it's not going to be as good. It just depends on how many Suunto users are out there, because that's where that data comes from. Still, when you look at it on the unit, it makes it super clear as to where people are actually routing with my route overlaid on top of that. Garmin also has their own popularity routing data, which is arguably a much better data set than anything that Hammerhead has. The display of that data doesn't tend to be like super super awesome. It kind of gets lost in the shuffle of everything. Meanwhile, the Wahoo one tends to be the most minimalist with what it displays on the display. From a mapping standpoint, really just focused on here's your route and here's the main road that are around you. It kind of like just gets rid of all the clutter everywhere else. Again, it's all kind of what you want from a personal preference standpoint. The other big difference between the three of them is when you want to go rogue with the unit itself, meaning that you have no planned routes, you have no like anything else, you just want it to tell you to go do something. So in the case of Garmin, you can say, hey, I want a 50-kilometer ride, and it'll go out and give you a 50-kilometer ride based on all that heat map data. And generally speaking, those rides are very, very good. You can even tell I want to go to the west or the east or the south or whatever you want. And in my experience, those tend to be very good rides. In the case of both Hammerhead and Wahoo, you can't do that at all. Likewise, only Garmin has a points of interest database on there where you can search for things like bike shops and restrooms and water stops and coffee shops and all that kind of stuff on the fly, versus the other units you'd have to use your phone to find the exact location or know the name of the thing you're going to in order to route to it. Meaning if you were to sum up this entire section, if you've got a planned route from Strava or Komoot or something like that, you're not going to see much difference between them. Where you do tend to see the differences is if you're just doing ad hoc routing on the fly, that's where the Garmin is going to give you more ability to do that without any sort of connectivity, versus the other two will require some sort of connectivity from your phone to be able to do that kind of planning on the fly. Now, one area you're probably likely to use the navigation features the most is when you are traveling. So let's swing back into the port for a real quick second. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, this video is actually sponsored by the Grand Canary Tourism Board. Of course, I've been coming here, like I said, for about a decade, riding, running, hiking, like doing all the sporty things. In fact, this past weekend, my wife raced here. She did the Challenge Family Triathlon, great event for the entire family. We went out here, the kids cheered all day long, from the swim to the bike to the run. And when they had enough cheering, then I got them ice cream. And of course, after that, they just simply played on the beach for a while watching her race. She won her age group, by the way. Now, from a cyclist standpoint, there's of course epic rides here. You can do really long rides. I've done 5, 6 plus 7 hour rides in the past, but it's also great for a lot of shorter rides too. Like yesterday morning after the family and I finished our breakfast, they headed to the pool and I just simply headed up in the mountains, about 2.5 hour ride, nothing too crazy. And the cool part is there's tons of other sports here to do as well. I was out doing a lot of running and hiking and an absolute boatload of swimming. I've swam every single day, at least twice a day, out doing testing of GPS watches, making a great place to escape to in the fall, winter, and spring because you don't need a coat or anything like that for any of your activities. But in the highly unlikely event that you do get bad weather, the hotel I'm staying at back there actually has 2 kicker bikes in there. I'm not kidding, 2 kicker bikes with Zwift. The whole thing is absolutely insane. Maybe I'll do just a video on that just because I've never had a hotel have kicker bikes and that's pretty darn cool. And of course the food is good too, which is like the 2 things you need as a cyclist. Anyways, definitely check out Island of Gran Canaria if you're looking for a place to escape to as an athlete. It is a pretty awesome spot. Okay, so what about climbing and climb-related metrics? So when you're going up a mountain. Obviously, I did a ton of that in Gran Canaria. And in this case, I'm using the Climb Pro equivalencies on each of these 3 units. They all call them different things, but it's the same general concept of showing you information about that climb automatically. And for all 3 units, they do this both for planned routes as well as on the fly. So if you're just riding along without any planned route and you're going up a hill, it'll be like, hey, I know where the top of this climb is automatically. Here's your distance to the top of the climb. Here's the average incline, both upcoming as well as total left. Here's your total altitude left to go to the top. All that is pretty good. And in my testing, all these 3 did very, very similar across the board. Hammerhead has improved the European maps back a couple months ago, and that does seem to have made a pretty good difference in the upcoming elevation gradient numbers, so like 8%, 7%, etc., being more accurate in Europe, where in the past it was really pretty like random sometimes as to when it was accurate. So then looking at a different sort of segment, what about Strava Live segments? All 3 of them support Strava Live segments. That means that if you have a Strava premium account or basically a paid account, they'll pull in those Strava Live segments that you favorited and then show you your progress on that segment against your competitors or against the KOM, etc. Now, while all 3 have this feature, there are some notable differences. In this case, Hammerhead for me easily takes the cake. One, both Hammerhead and Wahoo support multiple concurrent segments, meaning that you can have 2 or 3 segments that are overlapping, showing up at the same time. You just simply tab through them. Garmin only supports 1 segment at a time being shown. That's really notable on sometimes those big climbs where you may have different segments, some to the very top, some to like a turn-off point, etc., that you just simply would not see in the case of Garmin. Now, if Strava Live segments aren't your jam, don't worry, you can disable that across all 3 of them, no problems at all, so it'll never show you any of that at all. So continuing to dig deeper, what about structured workouts? All 3 of these do support structured workouts, so the ability to have a pre-planned workout that comes from some sort of training platform like Training Peaks or Trainer road, all three of them do support that. Wahoo also supports their own system platform as well for pulling in workouts from that. And then Garmin supports every other platform on the planet. And this is one of those things where this is where you see the big difference for Garmin if you don't have Training Peaks or Trainer Road, because they have Final Surge and Exert, and again, like literally dozens and dozens of different companies out there push structured workouts to Garmin. Then when it comes to actually doing that workout outside, you can see some of this side by side right here. I find that both the Garmin and Wahoo implementations really understand the structured workout mindset of an athlete and how that is supposed to work. Hammerhead doesn't seem like they understand that. They're just missing some core data fields and data pages when you're actually doing that workout that you want to know. And the display of those target ranges is just really weird. See, even Wahoo agrees right there. Still, Hammerhead has been adding and making some changes to their structured workout, even in the last firmware update 2 weeks ago. So they do seem to be listening to the feedback from basically everyone on that, and hopefully they'll be able to address some of those gaps here soon. Lastly, for lack of anywhere else to stick this, Garmin also has their Power Guide feature, which kind of fits into structured training in a way. Power Guide allows you to go ahead and load up a race course, the actual file, like a GPS file of a route that you may be doing. From there, it'll give you the actual power targets for each chunk of that particular route. So a different power target when you're going up a climb, and then based on the climb gradient, it'll change those power targets and so on, and you can adjust that in real time as well. Neither other unit has that, so it's something to keep in mind if you want that kind of feature. The next category is things like physiological metrics, and this will be a relatively straightforward category because there's only one company that has it, Garmin. Neither Hammerhead or Wahoo have any sort of physiological metric. So things like training load, training recovery, training status, load focus, all of those kind of areas, stamina, etc. Those are all things that are only on the Garmin unit that Wahoo and Hammerhead haven't even tried to touch. Likewise, only Garmin will actually give you suggested workouts. So if you want to put a fondo on your unit, it'll tell you which workouts to do every single day, basically give you a coaching plan for that particular race that you have. The other two don't do that. Same goes for having a complete calendar of your upcoming workouts and all that kind of stuff. That's only on the Garmin side. Now, a lot of people don't care about that at all, and that's perfectly fine, but it is a pretty big differentiating factor between Garmin and the other units if that is a feature that you care about. Speaking of physiological metrics, one that kind of get grouped into that is crash detection. Neither of the other two units have it, only Garmin has crash detection. So if you do crash, in the case of Garmin, it'll notify your friends and family automatically. That way they can call for help or something like that, versus the other two units will just shrug and kind of laugh at you. So next up, what about battery life? Now all three of these have the claimed battery life on the sheet right there that you can see, but let's talk about real world battery life. Now certainly if we look at those claimed specs, we would see that the Hammerhead has the least amount, followed closely by Wahoo, and then Garmin is just way beyond their competitors. Reality check from the real world, that's pretty much the way it works out as well. Here's a battery chart from one ride right there, showing my actual data from that ride. The Hammerhead ended up about 12.5 hours, the Wahoo ended up about 23 or so hours, and the Garmin is on track for 32 hours of battery life. All three units were configured the exact same in terms of like brightness levels, as well as sensors connected and all that kind of goodness. So they're pretty even across the board. Still, you can get even more battery life if you want to, especially in the case of the Garmin. You can not only decrease the display brightness, which tends to be the biggest driver of battery consumption on these three devices, but also decreasing down from multi-band or dual frequency GPS to a more basic GPS setting for areas that don't have a lot of GPS complexity will drastically increase your battery life. Okay, so next up we got sensor connectivity. How do they handle connecting things like power meters and heart rate straps and all that kind of stuff? All three of them support pretty much all the majors that you can see right there. All that stuff is covered on both ANT Plus and Bluetooth Smart. Now the elephant in the room is that the Hammerhead Karoo 3 does not support Shimano Di2 displaying that stats. I've covered that in my entire review. That's a big old thing where Shimano has basically blocked and banned Hammerhead from supporting that, despite every other device on the planet supporting it just fine. I don't know if that's going to change. There is a third-party app called KI2, which you can download and install on your Hammerhead Karoo device, but that's not yet available for the Karoo 3. Once it is, then that solves a problem for you. It's available for the Karoo 2 already, so it's not a problem there, but right now it's not yet available for the Karoo 3. Beyond that, there are a crap ton of other sensors out there that are somewhat fringe, but if you've got one, then you probably want that connectivity, that are largely only supported on the Garmin platform via ConnectIQ. For example, aero sensors for time trial bikes or things like that is only the Garmin side of stuff. So that then segues nicely into third-party integrations and apps, which basically has kind of two layers to it. The first is connectivity to third-party platforms like Strava and Training Peaks, etc. all three got you covered there for all the major platforms out there. But as is the common theme here, if you get to a platform that's not one of those top like 6 to 10, that's really only going to talk to Garmin, which connects to, I'm guessing, hundreds if not thousands of platforms out there. Platforms you've never heard of and will probably never hear of, but if you're one of the users of those platforms, then you probably want that connectivity. So again, you got to kind of figure out what you want. From there, you get into the actual apps that run on the devices themselves. Starting off on Wahoo, doesn't support any apps. Then you get to Hammerhead. You can run Android apps on this, so you could put Spotify on there or the Zwift Companion app and things like that. But those apps, as of right now, don't really integrate with the rest of the Hammerhead data set or kind of features there, so they're really just running on the side, just like an Android phone were. And then you get to the Garmin side of it, which of course has all of their entire Connect IQ platform for data pages and data fields and standalone apps and all that kind of stuff. For some people, they'll never use any of that stuff. Yeah, other people might for other integrations to other sensors or displaying other data types or recording other data types. Okay, so next up we've got the manufacturer-provided phone and web and kind of app platforms. In other words, the things that support these devices. Well, all three of them have apps for their devices, but they are drastically different. In the case of the Hammerhead Karoo, its app is basically just a connectivity straw to the internet. It's a tunnel to the internet for connectivity. There is really no features whatsoever in the app that you can actually interact with. You can't see like your ride totals or things like that. Up from there, you've got Wahoo, where you can see your ride totals and ride stats. You can change settings. You can do quite a bit. You can do basically everything that you want to do. But then one layer from there is Garmin's app, which has tons of trending and reporting and all the things in the world that you want. Some might argue way too many things, but those things do exist there, and thus you have to at least consider that it has way more features from an app standpoint, a native app standpoint anyways, than the other two. On the website side of things, so Wahoo doesn't actually have a consumer-facing website, so that makes that easy. Hammerhead does have a website that you can look at your past rides just at an individual level. You can't do like trending over months or things like that, but you can go ahead and plan routes there, and the route planner is very good. Allows you to go ahead and pull in files as well as URLs from major route platforms, so that all works pretty well. And then on the Garmin side, again, a massive web platform that is just well beyond the other two. Ultimately, you see three different philosophies from the three different companies. Garmin aims for the holistic philosophy of they're going to cover everything that you might need. You can get it from Garmin for free within their app, their website, everything, all that kind of stuff is covered. Wahoo kind of straddles the middle ground there of they want to provide you all those core functions and then farm out the rest to third-party platforms. So if you want more in-depth analysis of your rides, then go off to Trending Peaks or something like that. And then Hammerhead is really just focused on the device itself. Yes, they have the web platform for planning a route, but that mostly comes from Hammerhead's history on the routing side. Once you get beyond that routing area, there's just really no other features at all except for things on the device itself. Okay, so the last section then is GPS accuracy as well as elevation accuracy. And I'm happy to report all three of them are great. All three of them have multi-band or dual frequency GPS. All three of them have very solid altimeters. The Hammerhead Karoo 3 got an updated altimeter there, and I haven't had any problems from a sensing standpoint on my rides with these units. I did have a single ride in the case of the Karoo where it did not correctly do its calibration at the beginning of the ride. Hammerhead's looking into that software bug, but that wasn't a sensor issue. That was just the software didn't do the calibration it was supposed to at the beginning of the ride, and thus its altimeter data was offset from the rest of the ride. In my written review though, I go into tons and tons of data sets from all three of these units if you want to look at that data more deeply. Okay, there you go, a complete look at every single feature difference. Keep in mind my written review of this also dives even more deeply into some of the stuff I just couldn't possibly cover without this video being like an hour long. But again, all three units are great. You're going to be happy with any of these three units. It just depends on which portion of which feature is most important to you. And then from that, just look back at all these different sections and figure out which unit does it the best for your particular needs. As always, if you found this video interesting or useful, just give it a like at the bottom there or subscribe for plenty more sports technology goodness. It's going to be a busy June. Have a good one.